All right, so now that we have our UV set up, we're going to prep this to go over to Substance Painter, and there's going to be a couple things we want to do here. One of the major things that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to give separate materials to separate objects, so that way they'll port in with separate materials. So we're going to put a material on the axe, and we're going to put a material on the hero that are shared. And the way Substance Painter organizes the scene is when we import these, it identifies those, and it creates a separate layer set for each of these. And this will make it so that we can export two objects while being able to visualize them in the same scene. So two materials is going to be kind of the first thing that we want to get. Now, the next thing that's very important is going to be our naming conventions, and we're going to utilize naming conventions to achieve something called an explode bake. An explode bake is where you separate things out so they're not overlapping, and we can do that using naming conventions inside of Substance Painter. In this particular case, we're going to use a high and a low naming convention, but we also might consider separating out certain chunks of geometry where needed. I don't think we'll need to for this one, but that will be one of the things we'll be creating. The final thing we'll be creating is an ID map, which is going to allow us to identify materials very quickly and just drag and drop in some base materials to get started with, which will be very convenient. We'll do this on the high poly in particular. That's going to be where this is going to matter. So let's go ahead and first start out with our base materials here on our game meshes. Here I have my character game mesh selected. It does look like I have some animation data for some reason. I must have accidentally pressed S, so I'm going to get rid of that. You want to delete your history, freeze your transforms on these, so they're all set up. And then I'm just going to come in and right click. We're going to assign a favorite material. I'll just put this in here as blend, and we'll just name this hero. I use Lamberts and blends because they kind of universally transfer through programs, if you're kind of wondering. Then if I can find my game mesh here, I'll go and assign a new favorite to this one. I'll assign a blend, and we'll just name this one axe. And that should give us the different specifics there. Now, as far as these go, we can go ahead and Shift P on the axe, Shift P on the hero here, and just go ahead and name these according to each other in terms of high and low. Now, I am going to turn off the axe here so I don't see the high, and I'll just name this axe underscore low. When it comes to the helm, we'll just make this helm underscore low. And I'm doing this in all lowercase. So let me do that on the axe here. We'll make this our knees underscore low, legs underscore low, shoulders underscore low, and then torso underscore low. Now, with the hero low, we can make sure that's mapped to this layer. I'll just add selected. We can turn off the visibility, and the axe low should still be good. We can then come into the next ones here, and we can get this set up. So for the axe high here, we are going to combine these, but I'm going to separate these by color first. Now, I'm going to take a look at this and just kind of get a feel for where I want the IDs to go. So basically, we're going to have kind of a steel metal, and this one's going to be a dark steel. Notice it's different from our armor, so we're going to want to make that a different color, and then a wood. So this one's going to be completely unique. I'm going to select the top and bottom here. For this one, I'm actually going to assign a Lambert, and I'll just go ahead and assign it a green color. Then on the shaft here, I'll go and assign another Lambert here. So we'll assign favorite, Lambert, and we'll just go ahead and assign this a blue, or red. We'll use red for this. This will serve as the base for our ID map. And what it's going to do is it's going to bake this to a color map so we can use a mask color picker to select these individual colors to add as a mask to various things like smart materials. I'm going to grab the whole thing now and just do a mesh combine. That's going to take a moment because these are high poly. We're going to delete the history here, and then we're going to name this axe high. So I'm going to name this axe underscore high. We can then proceed to do the same thing with our hero. I do need to decide which hero I'm using, right? We have the hero high, and we want to pick the one that has the individual pieces. Now, the retopo base here, this was on another layer. I can actually just delete this. So we can just delete that whole one. We can delete that layer even. We don't need it. And we're just going to basically change the colors here and combine these. Now, we want to find common colors where possible to create our separate materials. I'm going to want something different here on the head, shoulders for the metals, but those are going to be my main metal areas. So I'll just select these together. I'll assign a new favorite. We'll just do a Lambert. And under this, we've already used red and green. I'll just go ahead and slap on yellow here. Then we can come in and we can look at another color. For example, maybe the gold, it would be the horns and the kneecaps. So I could go ahead and assign these a base color here. So we'll go ahead and assign a favorite here, Lambert. And I could go ahead and just give that something like magenta here. Then we could come in, we could look at something like the blue torso. This is going to have its own setup here. So I'll just assign a new favorite, Lambert. And we could go ahead and grab something completely different we haven't used, like blue. Then we can come in and look at other areas like the shirt here and the legs. Those are going to use the same color. We could grab these here. We can assign a new favorite here, Lambert, and come in with a different color. So we've already used kind of all the basic ones here. I don't think we've used cyan yet, so I could grab cyan. And then we can start using some sort of in-between colors for the rest. So the belt, or the hands, belt, and boot, these are going to be using a base of a leather brown. We'll obviously have to add in some other stuff. And if we have the ability to select faces, we could do that here. Since I don't quite, I'm not going to worry about it. For this one, I'll go with something like an orange. So we have those mapped. And then the belt buckle I kind of missed here. We were able to use yellow for that. Now I could go and dig up the same color, or I could just literally come in here and assign a new material for yellow, because none of this is going to transfer. So I'm okay with that. We'll just switch this to a Lambert. Go ahead and grab that yellow, and that will map to gold. And then finally, for the background head color here, I could go ahead and assign a new favorite, Lambert, here. And we could give this a color, or we could even leave this black if we felt it was appropriate. So I might use black. Black's a little bit dangerous here, though, because it might fill in the blanks. So I'll use a strong purpley color, and we'll use that kind of as our base. So what we need to do now is organize this based on our hierarchy over here. So for example, our helmet, we're going to want to combine these to represent what our helmet's currently using. And I believe it's just the horns and the helmet, so that'll be easy enough. We want to assign the materials beforehand, though, because it's not really ideal to map across millions of polygons. So we'll select these two, do a mesh combine. This should bring this out. I always like to delete history. And then I'm just going to copy the helm low name, double click, and we'll go ahead and name this helm high. We can then do the next one, which is the knees. The knees are simple enough. They're already set up. We'll just shift P. These are knees low. We'll copy and paste. We'll name this knees high. Then the next is going to be the legs. So for the legs, I need to copy, or I need to select this guy, shift select this guy, do mesh combine, then delete the history on this, and we can go ahead and copy over legs low, paste, and switch low to high. Then we have the shoulders here, so I'll just shift P those from the group. We have shoulders low, I'll double click, shoulders high. And then after that, we have the torso. So the torso is going to be all of this. It's going to be the head, the body, the belt buckle, all that stuff. We're going to want to do a mesh combine on, delete the history, and then we'll go ahead and copy torso low, and then we'll go ahead and paste this to the torso high. I accidentally copy and pasted something else, and that should match. Now I'm going to check one area here really quick. Okay, so it looks okay. I thought I was having some issues with the belt, but I think this is good to go. Now, these two groups we can just get rid of. We can do a quick file, optimize scene size to get rid of anything extra. We can highlight everything, delete the history on it, modify freeze transforms, and this will be what we kick over. Now, what I like to do is I like to save this scene, and I actually like to break this out into the source images here. I like to create a new folder here, and I'll name this hero. We can just name it like that. I create a subfolder in here called texturing, and what I will name this for is basically our hero export file. And what I know this has is I know it has the ID map, it has the low to high, it has the naming conventions, it has everything laid out we need. We're good to go. There's a couple things I want to point out before we export out of here you need to be aware of. Notice I tried to maintain the order of the low to high here, down here in the stack. So we're starting with the axe on the low, axe on the high, helm on the low, helm on the high, knees on the low, knees on the high, legs on the low, legs on the high, shoulders on the low, shoulders on the high, torso on the low, torso on the high. This order matters, I believe. It at least did in the earlier forms of Substance Painter. I don't know if it does now, but I haven't bothered to test it. So in the past, it mattered. So that probably means now it matters, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to grab all of these here on the low. So all of your ones named low. We're going to come up here to File. We're going to go to Export Selection. I like to export as OBJs. Some people like to use FBXs. I find FBXs have issues, so I go with OBJs. And we're going to put this into our source images, into our hero texturing file. And over here, I want to make sure groups are on. Actually, I just want to make sure everything's on. Kind of a unique thing. You want to transfer everything here. And I'm just going to name this hero_low and click export. What I can then do is repeat the same process for the high. I'll just hit G to bring this up again. And we'll just go ahead and do hero_high, but make sure you have everything turned on here in terms of the specific type. And now what we're ready to do is test this out in Substance Painter and make sure it worked. And the main thing we're going to do is we're going to bake, right? So I'm going to launch up Substance Painter because I don't have that open yet. And we'll go ahead and hop into there and we'll take a look at how to do the baking process in Substance Painter next. Notice that my Maya is still exporting the little circles here. So I'm also going to let that go. Just be aware that if you are doing, you know, a million plus polygon high poly like I have here, the export process may take a while. So I'm going to jump ahead. Once this is all done, my software is launched, this is exported, and then I'll take you through the process of baking in Substance Painter. All right, so we're over here in Substance Painter. I've kind of gutted mine to look a little bit different. Yours might have a different layout than mine, but hopefully we can have the same navigation here. I think I've just gotten rid of a log bar that added in. Substance Painter UI has changed constantly since it's been released, so this is what I like to work at, and I may continue to adjust it. Now, to get started in here, we're just going to come up here to File, New, and we're going to swap our resolution. You can pick a resolution to work at. Usually, I like to work at or below. I try to work at the delivery resolution if possible, but sometimes you need to work higher. For example, the last game job I worked at a very low resolution. 512 was our limit for the mobile game, but sometimes we needed, a 4K character for marketing. So it was kind of a dilemma on where to work at for that. But 4K doesn't really compress down very well to 512. So I actually find for games, working at the target is kind of nice. And it gives you a better idea of the details you're going to get. For this one, I'm going to work at 2048 though, since we can kind of afford to. So we'll go with that. Under selection, you're just going to navigate to your asset that we put as the low object. So let me go ahead and find this. We'll come into our source images here, go into our hero texturing and just grab the low. And I'm going to copy this directory in case we need it. Hit open, and then we can just click OK to come into here. Now, one thing I haven't checked is if the symmetry line on this was softened. So sometimes you don't notice this in Maya and you have to soften after mirroring. It looks like ours is okay. And our character looks good to go. We have both these in here. Now, something I want to point out over here is notice we have two blends. The names didn't carry over, but one of these is going to be the axe and one of these is going to be the hero. So you can see those two blends here. You can actually double click to rename these. So I can rename that hero. I can rename this axe. And what's important is the layer stack to each of these will change. So they're going to be specifically assigned to those. Now, what we also need to be aware of is I believe we have to bake for both of them. So we'll take a look at that. But, make sure you're on whatever layer you want to bake to first. I'll do the hero here. And we can go ahead and navigate over to our bake section. Now, you can do that down here. Let me move these around here. Like I said, I might move my UI around. Under this section here. So your texture settings, if you come into here, there's this bake mesh map section. That's going to be what we want to click and open. That's going to open our bake menu, and we can do our baking from here. Now, what we want to do is we want to input a bit of information. First off, we want to make sure our output size is the same as what we're working at. In here, we want to input our high res, so that's going to be one of the big things. You can do so by clicking the file icon here. If you don't want to use a high res, you can see this use low res poly. I do that occasionally, not very often, but in this case, I do want to click this. You can see our hero high in here. This is going to take a moment to load, indicated by these bars down here, but notice these populated here. So there's a couple of these we're going to want to play around with. First off is max rear distance. I usually like to crank this all the way. This is kind of the backside catch range. You don't always want to crank it all the way, but I find it very helpful. The next is going to be the max frontal distance, which is going to control this here. This is our actually bounding box. Now, when you are doing a bake, you want to make sure that this box surrounds the high poly mesh. It is our projection area, but you also want to make sure it doesn't go too far, because if they clip into each other, you're going to have issues. So you kind of want to dial this in, and you'll see it's red when it's not there. And you want to just pull it exactly to where there's no more red showing anywhere. So areas like this, if they're showing as red, they're basically going to have a hole in your texture. Now, this also might give you a hint on where you might need to come in here and add a hard edge. For example, there, I might actually need to use a hard edge on to make sure this bakes correctly. You can also play around with things like relative bounding box and average normals here. Sometimes turning off average normals will give you a better result. It just kind of depends. But usually we want average normals turned on. So something like that looks like it's clearing up the red and giving me an okay result. You'll notice areas like this axe, though, that's a problematic area. I may need to take this a little bit further to kind of cancel that out, in which case this might start causing problems elsewhere, but hey, we'll find out. Now, in terms of matching here, you'll notice it's set to always. We're going to switch this to naming convention. And if we do that, you'll see by mesh name, you'll see what happens is it swaps to underscore low and underscore high. We've already set that up. We're good to go. The next thing we want to do is consider adding in some anti-aliasing here to reduce the blur. So we can do that. I'll go ahead and set this to be 4 times or 16 times. I'll just do 4 times on this initial pass. Then over here on this side, we have all the maps that we can bake to. Now, there's a couple different settings we're going to change in this, but before we do, I want to go ahead and come up here and switch the output size to something like 512 and do a quick test bake. This is going to allow me to check if I need to change any normals, and certain areas like this look quite odd on this axe. I might even come in here and double check this on the game axe in particular, because I could have swore we put a hard edge there, and that almost looks like it doesn't have a hard edge, but it looks like it does. So it must just be kind of strange how it comes off there. But what I can do is click base selected, and this is going to go through the process of baking this. And what we're going to do is just kind of check and make sure there's no issues with it. Now, notice this is only baking the hero. So I could actually do a different axe bake, which might be worth noting because we just overcorrected this for the axe. So we might come in here and change that. We'll have to confirm that it is just doing one hero and not the other object first as well. We can do that by returning to painting mode here. And if you take a look at the axe, it looks like it did bake it with it. And notice we are having that issue down there. So that's an issue we're going to want to try and correct for. So, hey, look, we have something to try and fix. Not what I wanted, but hey. All right, and then on the hero character here, it looks like everything baked out pretty darn good here. I don't think we really need to do much more of an explode bake. These are the areas here, though, that can be problematic. You can see the arm there, how we're sort of getting an overlap there. And other areas, like a hand. I think the hand's okay. It's not really near a pit, so we're not getting anything too weird there. That also looks like a hard edge, which is concerning. I don't remember hardening that edge. This area here has a hard edge, which it needs, so that's fine. These have a hard edge. So some of these are looking kind of weird, just in terms of UV seams. But it looks okay. I don't think any of these are too alarming where we need to really worry too much. There is this area here. You can see how we're getting those weird lines running across there. So that's another area we may want to experiment with and see if we can't fix what's causing that issue. The helm looks okay. All right, so once we have this, we can come over here and we can take a look at our objects. And there's a couple different things that we're going to want to check in terms of what might be right, what might be wrong. The first is going to be the normals. What's wrong with the normals? Do they need to be softened? Do they need to be hardened? Next thing is going to be things like UVs, right? So there's a lot of different things you can check. So under the UV editor, I might check these first just to make sure, and I don't see any issues. But looking at this, part of this is a 1, 2, 3, 4-sided object here. And what might be happening is we just need a little bit more support geometry here. So if I come in here with my symmetry on, and we just use the multi-cut, we might be okay just drawing a line from here to here. And if I do this, this might fix the issue it's having, believe it or not. As strange as that is, those are things that can absolutely be factors, is the triangulation of the surface. You know, if it doesn't have enough support here, that could be what's causing the issue. So that might be all we need for the axe fix. I don't know if we'd need more. You know, the hard edge, soft edge, looks like it's working here. So we can just kind of double check that. You know, that area is the main problem. I don't see any other problems on the axe. So we'll go ahead and try that. And then when it comes to the body here, there's really nothing wrong with the body. The only issue is some of these might be better off projected differently. And it kind of depends on the level of interaction we want with these. So how could we do that? Well, the fact that these are all separated is actually how we could do it. So for example, on the torso, we could take these arms here. Using the UV shell, we could break these out into their own piece. So what I could do is I could just select these. We could do something like an edit mesh extract. This will separate these to be their own piece. We could then combine these, delete their history. And we'll want to take the torso here and delete its history and remove it from a group, but also name it again. So we can Shift P. And I might want to double check other areas too, like the head, if there's anything that looks problematic with like the head neck transition. I don't think there is. You know, I think only that armpit area is problematic. So with that in place, we'll have to kind of maintain our order here. But we're going to name this our arm underscore low and just bring it back up here. I'm going to put it just below the axe, so that way we can maintain the hierarchy set up here. And then this will be our torso low, torso underscore low. Notice at this point, I could also separate out things like the gloves if I wanted to. I don't, honestly, but we could. That's the thing that matters. I could also check something like the belt here, you know, if it's getting too much interaction, but I think it's looking okay. You know, I don't see any issues with how that baked. And then we need to make this change in the height poly. Now, the change in the height poly is a little bit more annoying because we do need to come in here and do a mesh separate. We can't just extract, and the reason why is there's just too much going on here. But we can go ahead and take this chunk here, that's the arms. We can shift select to grab everything else and do a quick combine to bring those back together as our torso. Then we just want to put these back into the same order here. So I'm going to take torso low. We can go ahead and name this torso high. And then in here, we have our arms. I'm going to delete their history. Shift P to remove them. And then we'll just go ahead and do the same thing here. We'll name this arm high. And correct the torso here. And then just bring these back to be in the same order. So we're going to take the arm high, put it under the axe. High, so it's same order. And then take the torso high and put it under the arm high. All right. Now, whenever you make these changes, it's good to save. You know, we know how to undo them, so not a big deal. Make sure you delete the history, though, if you do make changes, and then go ahead and save this. So our next step is going to be to export these again, and we could try and see if there's any information from that bake that might help us. One thing I might double check on the axe low here, though, is to just come in here to these edges and just double check that these ones in these corners here are hard. So just coming into this area here and making sure that they're hard. Just do a mesh display harden edge. That way there's no question about it. Also remember to delete history. And we're just going to export right over the old one. All right, so make sure you select the low here, export selection, and we should just be able to export right over our same low poly here. Sometimes it's good to delete the old and create a new. Make sure that you have on for all the various groups. I'm noticing those got turned off, and I'm curious if maybe that was an issue last time. And then we'll just repeat the same here with the high. So we'll just go ahead and export right over our high. And this one's going to take a moment, so we'll let that go. But we can go to open up a new scene here. Same settings, I'll just keep it 2048. Come in here to hero low, go ahead and hit OK to get this set up. We can discard our changes, and then just proceed to do our bake again. So we can come to the bake mesh maps here, and hopefully this time around we'll have the change we need. Just make sure Maya finishes exporting before you try and bring in the high poly. So we'll go ahead and let that finish here, and then we'll bring in the high poly to do our test. Hopefully it doesn't take too much longer. I did have an issue a moment ago with Maya 26 or 2026 where I had to basically force crash it and reopen it to export the low. So there's definitely some bugs in it. Looks like it exported fine. Let's just go ahead and pipe it in here to our high here. All right, cool. So it looks like the axe issue has slightly improved. I'm kind of curious if I have a rogue vertex here that I'm not aware of. I should double check that. I don't think I do, but you never know sometimes. No, looks like I don't. It's very weird, the result it's giving us. I think we can still make that work, especially since the main issue is the arm. But same setup here, just crank that rear distance. Let's come in here by mesh name. Anti-aliasing we can do 4 times. I'm going to set this to be a 512 real quick here. And then just coming into here, let's see if we can fix this. Something to be aware of is that average normals here will probably fix the axe, but it's going to screw up the character. So something to kind of be aware of. But we'll go ahead and increase our frontal distance here and go ahead and bake select it again. And if this doesn't work for the axe, we'll go ahead and troubleshoot it a bit more. We do know that adding in that geometry does seem to have helped a bit, but not entirely. So that's quite peculiar. Yeah, it looks like we're still having a little bit of an issue down there. And it could be that it actually needs soft edges, which is kind of funny. But that may ultimately be what's going on there, is a need for soft edges along the axe, which is wild, but might actually be the case. So I can come back out into here. We can make sure the arm's baked. You can see we have no issues with the arms this time because we have that correctly set up to bake there. This area here is a little bit weird. I might want to double check that. That's an area where we might do a hardened edge potentially on the lip of the shirt, or we might do a softened edge if I have a hard edge there. The belt, this is just an artifact from it being a 512 map and not a 2048. So once we get it to 2048, that should be fine. But yeah, the axe there, that little area is a little bit annoying. And even this base area here, I could be mistaken, but we may need a softened edge for that, which is not what I would anticipate. But we could try that out real quick. On these axe areas here, even the top, potentially, it looks okay, but, if the bottom needs a soft edge, then maybe it does too. So we can double check this and just kind of see. I don't have Object X as an option here. I might just turn this off so I'm not selecting anything important that I can't see. But we can come around here now to this edge. And if you want, you can turn off the materials with this button here. That makes it a lot easier to see. Unfortunately, I feel like Maya's gotten worse in that regard. They're trying to adapt to the viewport. It's making it harder to use. Straight up, but whatever. Let me just double check the smoothing here. All right, doesn't look like there's anything hiding. So we'll just try a soften edge on this, see if that gives us a better result in our software. And then let me double check the character low here real quick on the torso for this bottom edge, if I'm using a hard edge or a soft edge. And it looks like I'm using a soft edge. With areas like this that go really thin, sometimes it's good to try a hard edge. And we can sometimes remove that later even. So let's try that out, delete the history on these real quick, and see if this gives us what we want. And if not, we'll probably find a compromise, or I'll come back and troubleshoot it when I have a little bit more time. But let's go ahead and see. And you really don't know until you try things out. That's the annoying thing about the bake process. A vast majority of the time, it will not work the first time around. I'm going to tell you that straight up. It's probably something that's hard for students to learn if you're new to this. If you've been doing this for a while, you already know it's not really too hard to learn. So taking a look at this, what's kind of interesting is this is asymmetrical all of a sudden. So that means that my softening edges didn't quite work completely. It means I missed something here. So let me just double check this. Somewhere on here, there's still a hard edge. So right there. So we'll go ahead and soften that. Positive note, though, is just from the looks of it already, I think we're in a good spot. So that's a good sign. If I come in and I look at that, it looks like that's going to bake correctly. And down here, that's looking pretty good, too, with the hard edge. So I think that I may have solved my issue. Let me go ahead and just double check that exported, and we'll just come back here to new, go ahead and select our low here and hit OK. Discard those changes. And then we can go ahead and do this bake here for our test bake. We'll do a final round of bakes after this. This is just kind of our initial go of things at 512. We'll go ahead and play around with the distances here. So it actually looks like maybe I needed a combination there. So one of these was right, one of these was wrong. So something needs to be soft, something needs to be hard. I'm guessing based on that top area, we need hard edges there and soft edges on the blade. So almost there. Happy medium. So ironically, that little accident may have gleaned me insights into what I needed here with a hard edge here, soft edge on the blade. And now, with this all together, hopefully we'll finally have our end result. So let me go ahead and harden that. Notice I am deleting the history every time on the low here. And just export again. Make sure you save as well your Maya scene. And now let's go ahead and see if this gives us what we want. All right, so let's go ahead and check the high here. Yep, that looks good. 512, increase the rear distance here by mesh name. And the frontal distance looks like I don't even need to adjust it. In this case, I might be able to even dial it back a bit, depending. Just make sure you don't get any red on your character. Make sure you have your by mesh name on and just go ahead and bake that. And let's just confirm this is good. And if it's good, I'll go ahead and take you through a handful of extra settings, and then we'll just go ahead and crank this up and get a really nice high quality normal and other map bake out of this. But all of this is already looking great. So let's just double check this inside of our viewport. Check the problematic area on the axe. Looks awesome. I think we fixed it, which is great. And then looking at the character, I don't see any issues here. So awesome. So let's come back to our bake maps and let's just crank these settings up. We're going to set this up here to 2048 to match our scene. Down here, we're going to set the anti-aliasing to 16. And we're going to go through a couple of these. If we come back over here with the ambient occlusion, something to be aware of is it's baking across meshes. So you can see it's going to bake onto the face and the face is going to bake back. Same with the shoulders. You can see we're going to have the shoulder and it's going to bake onto the arm. Sometimes this is desirable, sometimes it's not. I'm also noticing right there I have a spot missing. If we go back to bake mesh maps, that's usually because this isn't going out far enough. I'm not getting that indication here, which is kind of interesting, but I'm just going to increase this, a little bit further out here to make sure that's being accounted for, because that would kind of suck to have that throw everything off. Let me set this to 0.01, which I think was the default. So anyways, coming down here to make it so those ambients don't interact with each other, you can go to the ambient occlusion here, and you could switch this occlusion type here from always to only the same mesh. And that will make it so they don't interact between each other. And that can be nice for certain areas. It kind of depends on what we're going for. Like, for example, the kneecap onto the legs, if we didn't want that to necessarily cast there. I'm also noticing there's a hole there in the mesh, so there's all sorts of issues. Other things is like there and there. I think for this character, though, it might be fine to leave on. I don't think we necessarily need to separate it. But one I do like to do that for is the curvature. So ambient occlusion's kind of iffy. Curvature's almost always a yes, and we can't see it here. But if we don't, you get weird little circles in here. So I'd want to switch this to only the same mesh. And then after that, we should be good. So I'm going to click Bake Selected Textures here and save, and we should have our end result that we need. All right, so I let those bakes run through, and what we can take a look at now is just how this looks. I'm going to return to painting mode and just double check that we don't have any issues in terms of our texture, in terms of quality. So underneath here, you can see there's a little bit of an issue there that might need to be fixed. That could be an issue that requires a hard edge. It's also an issue we could potentially paint out. It looks really good all around, though, except for that area. Also, the interior here looks a little bit weird. So that's an example of somewhere I might want to end up using a hard edge on. This edge looks good. All these problematic side edges, those are cleaned up. So that belt area at this higher resolution, it's making me question things. I might need to adjust those, but just about everything else is looking really good here, which is awesome, and means we have most everything fixed up. Horns here, you can just kind of double check. I think those are looking fine. From a distance, no one's going to notice any of those issues. And our axe here finally seems to be functioning the way we intended. Let's just check that base, though. It's a little bit weird with the bevel there, but I think it works good enough. All right, we can check this area. That looks good. Okay, so I think most of this looks good. These areas are a little bit muddy, so our fix with that's probably going to be hard edges. And then down here, I'm a little bit iffy on it. It did have a weird effect in the bake, so let's take a look at that. I can hop over here to Maya really quick. We can go ahead and take a look at that on our low resolution for the torso here. And we can decide, if there's any changes we can make to this to kind of give this a better result. Let me look at the game mesh. And part of it could be if this is tucking too far in or out on that base area. It is interesting that it had such a good result on the top area. What I might play around with is coming into here and just using Make Live on the torso real quick. We could play around with something like Quad Draw here to finesse these. And I think what's happening is it's kind of tucking under there. I don't know if you can see that. But this might be one of those situations where we come back in and use like a World X symmetry here, make sure we're maintaining our symmetry. And we just pull this out to be more at an angle, and then maybe pull these up to kind of be more along here. Because I'm pretty sure we can get the soft edges to work, but I just think those were maybe tucking under too much, and for the sake of baking, we need to have those on the outside. Now, the interior area, I don't think there's any way around it here. That is kind of tucked back there too much. So this is an area where I think we can definitely just come in here and do a mesh display harden edge and just harden that out. And that should fix the issue that we're seeing here on that interior with those looking kind of extra gummy. But on the outsides, I don't think we need those hard edges. So we're going to hold out and hope that works. Just kind of do another once over on this. That looks pretty good. And then we can go ahead and try this bake again. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's hop into here. Once again, on the low, just kind of clear this out in terms of the history. Freeze transforms, not that we'd made any. And then go ahead and export this back over the low. And similar to what I've done before, I am going to do a low bake. Some things don't really reveal themselves till we get to a high bake, but we should be able to tell if these areas are going to be problematic on a low bake as well. So, it's a rinse and repeat process, but it's better to catch it now than find out later. There are workarounds we can do with it, so that's something to kind of also think about. We're not necessarily stuck with this, but it's better to have a good result here than a bad result later on. So in terms of this, I am just kind of looking at the normal. We can save some time here by just baking the normal. And I could set this a bit higher now to 2048 if I wanted to, since we're only baking one map. And just kind of check to see if the normal has any issues in terms of this troubleshoot process, since that's going to be the most telling one, the most revealing. Unfortunately, I'm going to click cancel bake here to stop that bake. Since it bakes both of these, I'll have to set the normal on both of these. That way, we don't spend the whole time baking this. The settings should be universal across them, though, so we don't need to worry about that. So let's just check our two problematic areas. The belt buckle here, you can see the hard edges fix the issue, nice and crisp. And down here, you can see tweaking those, fix the issue. Perfect, beautiful. All right, so I think we're good at this point to just kind of crank on those settings. All the settings look great, beautiful looking character. Looking forward to texturing this guy. So let's save our document here in Maya now that we finally have figured out our perfect normal placement, tweaked our character to be where we want it to be. Then we can come over here into the bake mesh maps, and on each of these we can go ahead and start enabling these to have the correct settings here in terms of what we want. We can click into these. And remember, in terms of this, I did decide I want to come into the curvature here, in particular on the character. So I might want to go back to the painting mode and just name these, since the names have kind of gotten lost. We can toggle that on and off. Blend 1 is going to be our hero, and Blend 2 is going to be our axe. On the axe, we don't need to worry about the curvature so much because it's not going to move, so it's probably fine not doing it individually. And also there is no individually, it doesn't have any individual chunks. So mainly on the hero here, we just need to come in here under that curvature and just make sure it's only same mesh. And we also might end up doing it on ambient occlusion layer. I don't really know. We'll see. But just make sure that's 2048. Make sure we don't have any clipping on any of our frontal distance. It bakes nicely, so I think the default I have here is going to be fine. Make sure your anti-aliasing set to 16. You'll never really notice it at 64, and you're just going to take forever baking. And click Bake here, and let this bake for a bit. And then once you have your bake map set up, we'll go ahead and save. And then we'll start in on the texturing process with this next. But step 1 is always get the good bake. You want to make sure that your bake reads well, that you're not having any issues. That is one of the hardest parts of game art and the most time consuming. So, absolutely get that right. Take the time to harden your normals, soften the normals, go back and forth. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And just as a fair warning, we might still encounter some issues. We didn't look it over entirely. We haven't started the texture process. And it's very common to go back and forth constantly. So I just really want to emphasize that for those of you that are moving forward. Just be mindful of that, that it may not just be one go. All right, so my bake finished here, and let's just make sure this is my final bake. So we have our resolution cranked up here. This was my problematic area last time. The sharpness here is a little bit odd, but from a distance, I think that's going to read okay. They're not quite 90-degree angles, but I think it's going to read okay in the lighting. This area works out okay too. You can see there's a little bit of muddiness there in terms of its interaction with the cloth, but I think that's just because we didn't take a super care in modeling that, and from this distance, none of those are going to show up. That's one of the other things to be aware of with game meshes, is a lot of the times it's a compromise of distance where this thing's going to be seen from. So just got to be mindful of that. The feet here kind of are a little bit low resolution on the back. Once again, I'm not too concerned, but you can see those angles kind of clearly manifesting in the normal map. So not exactly ideal. I might want to add some more geometry there for professional production. But the areas I actually care about, those are all looking excellent, and I think those are going to read nicely. I don't see any major issues across the board here, so we're ready to dive in and start texturing this guy. Now, pretty excited. Took a while to get here. Let's go and save this. I'll do a save as, and we're going to put this into our source images folder for our character. So I'll just bring this over to our game character, source images, hero, and we'll just name this hero _ texturing. Click that save button, and then we're good to go, ready to hit the ground texturing next. All right. So definitely seeing the fruits of our labor at this point, getting out of Maya into Substance Painter after going through the process of high poly, low poly. It's quite a feat. So if you're following along and if you made it this far, definitely pat yourself on the back and prepare for the texturing process, because it's going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to get this guy colored and looking cool pretty quick. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch the next video in the series when it goes live.